Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Have you ever created a custom delegate like this one and then create another one that has almost the same signature? And here, what if I tell you all of these custom delegate are unnecessary because the C# created a built-in delegate that solved this problem. They are called action, func, and predicate. But the most important question is not what are they. The most important question is why were they created. In this video, we are gonna to answer all of these questions. In the next section, we are talking about the anonymous method and lambda expression. What is the relationship between lambda expression and LINQ? Why we are saying the LINQ without the lambda expression is nothing. And also, we are talking about why we are some C# developers saying the delegate is something like lambda. Lambda is delegate. We are going to answer all of these questions. Let's get started. Now, it's time to talk about the action, func, and predicate. But before we start to understanding action, func, and predicate, first of all, we have to know what problem these three items solve. Imagine you are creating some custom delegate like this, and here you are creating, for example, 5, 6, or 10 custom delegate. But imagine you are creating a large application that in this large application you have a lot of custom delegate. All of these custom delegate have different name, but they have the same structure. Unfortunately, in situation like this, they are creating unnecessary code. Microsoft introduced generic delegate to solve this problem and remove the application. For this reason, the Microsoft created three sections: action, func, and predicate. Now, it's time to start with the action. What is an action? What does the action do? Imagine for situation like this. For example, the delegate has no return type. And for example, it has 1, 2, 3. The parameter is not important. The return type is void. For situation like this, we are using action. Action means the signature of action means we have no return type and we have some parameter. For example, here I have created a custom delegate. For the return type is void and I have no parameter. If I want to do that with the action, for example, let me remove all of these and come here and say, hey, I want to create an action. For example, I come here and say, hey, I want to create a custom delegate with action. Here I say, if you create something like this, what does it mean? For example, the name is, for example, my delegate. Here I'm saying, hey, the signature of this line of code here, it say, hey, all of the method have the return type is void and they have one parameter of type int they can pass to my delegate. Here I have created, for example, a method. The name is, for example, this one. Here I can pass this to my delegate because the return type is void and it has one parameter, but the type should be int. For example, here I'll say, for example, let me say int and let me change it type and say something like this: type for action. And if I pass this to my delegate, it will work because it has no return type. The return type is void and I have passed one parameter. Now, if I want to run this custom delegate, I can run it like before. For example, I told you in the previous video, I have two ways. First one is called invoke method, and the second one is type the name of your delegate and put and close parenthesis. And here I have to pass one parameter because the type is int and I say something like this. Now, if I run the program, you will see 25 in the output. But there is one important question about action. If you want to memorize it, you don't forget to say, for example, here, because I say, hey, type for action, and the type for action is in the output. Action means the return type is void. All of the method, the return type is void, and they have one parameter, two parameter, and maybe a lot of parameter. Maybe you ask here, hey, for situation that we don't have any parameter, what should I do? In situation like this, for example, let me create another method, something like this. And here I have no parameter And here, I just want to say, hey, processing, for example, processing. For example, say action processing. It has no parameter and the return type is void. When the return type is void means action. But I have no return type. I have come here and say, hey, action, just type the action with no angle bracket. We call this as angle bracket. It's the situation that you have no input parameter, just type the action keyboard and say, hey, action. And for example, the name is, what was that? Process, for example, process 2. And I come here and say process 2 and just call it. Now I will see action processing in the output. Did you see what happened? Let me summarize it. Action means no return type, means void, and the input parameter can have 1, 2, and a lot of, and when you have no input parameter, just type the name of action. The next item is Func. Func is something like this. It has a lot of item. Item 1, item 2, and item, for example, 3. But in what situation I can use Func? For situation that you have return type and you have input parameter. Did you see what happened? Func means you have return type, but action means you have no return type. Func but means you have return type. But how can I understand what is my input parameter and what is the type of my, for example, my output parameter? In situation like this, the last item means and show the type of your return type. What does it mean? Let me create a func. Here, I want to create something like this. Here, I say, for example, int, and for example, another one, and something like this. So let me show you something else. For example, a string, int, and int. Okay, and the name is, for example, func. And what kind of method I can pass to this func? What is the signature method? Here, I have 3 parameters, input parameter. The first one is string, the second one int, and the last one is int. I told you, the last item show the output parameter. What does it mean? It means I can pass all of the method has the return type of int, and they have, it's so important, 2 parameters. Okay, one of them is string and another one is int. If I come here, for example, I want to create a method is, for example, process. Let me call it process func. I can pass all of the method that the return type is int and it has 2 parameters. The first one is entry string and the last one is int. For example, something like this. And if I come here and say func processing, the return type should be something like this. For example, I want to return the age and do something like this. For example, let me do this. The name is name. Okay. Now I can pass this method to my func because the return type is int. Here, the last one, and it has 2 parameters. The first one is string, this is string, and the second one is int. And the last one show the output. The output is int, and here is int. Okay, now if I want to call it, let's say func, the name is Hossein, and the age is 36. And if I call it, you will see it say, hey, func processing, and the name is Hossein, okay, and it will return the age as an output. For example, if I come here and say, hey, int result, and if I come here and just uncomment that and say, hey, you will see the 36 in the output. Okay, did you see what happened? Okay, let me summarize it. Func means we have return type and we have a lot of input parameter. Okay. And what happens if we have, for example, a lot of items? For example, we have for example 3 items. The first one and the second one show the input parameter, and the last one show the return type. Okay, it's so important. And the last item is predicate. Predicate means we are using that for situation that we want to check one condition. For example, it means predicate. Let me come here and say, let me come here and copy that. Yeah, the predicate it will take one, for example, 1, 2, and another item, and it will return the output as a boolean. Sorry, I forgot to tell you some important point. In the func and action, you can have 16 parameter. 16, the max number of input is 16 parameter for action and func as a parameter. But func can have one item as a output type. For example, if we want to have the maximum number in a func item, for example, I can have 17, 16 for the max item as my input parameter, and one of them is as an output. Okay, but for predicate, for example, I'd say, hey, predicate. If I come here, it say, hey, for example, I want to have int, and say predicate. What kind of method I can pass to this item? For situation like this, I can pass the all of method, sorry, static, and all of the method, the return type is boolean. What happened? Bool. And for example, I will call it check, for example, user age. And I come here and say int age. And here, for example, I return true. For example, age, let me do something like this. Age is, for example, greater than 20. It will return. Now I can pass this to the predicate. Okay, it's so important. And if I come here and say predicate and pass a parameter, for example, 36, it will return true because the 36 is greater than 20. Now, if I want to summarize predicate means it will take parameter and it will return boolean because we use it to check the condition. But what is the difference between these two items? Okay, for example, I have something like this. For example, one have int and bool versus something like this, predicate int. What's the difference between these two items? The func return, it takes one parameter as an input, its type is int, and predicate take one item as an input, its type is int. Predicate return a boolean and func return a boolean. Okay, what's the difference? In the next part, we are talking about the difference between these two items in 1 minute. Okay, and after that, we are going to talk about the anonymous method, and the last subject is Lambda expression. Let's do that. Okay, if I want to compare predicate with func, and if I want to answer and compare these two items in two section, the first section I'm saying the answer is readability, because when you are using predicate user, it means you are checking a condition on the user. But for func user board, you cannot for example say, hey, this func is checking. Maybe it can do something else. Okay, and the next answer is in 2005, when the Microsoft create and introduced the generic list T, the Microsoft need and the developer need, for example, an item and a delegate that to check the condition. For this reason, they introduced predicate. And in 2007, when they are introducing the LINQ, they need to create a delegate to do all of the action for them. For example, for this reason, they introduced func and action. But why they didn't remove the predicate? The answer is the backward compatibility, because the predicate was compatible with all of the version, and it shows us that it's using for the condition. And that's the second answer that I'm saying. And for these two answers, the first one was readability, and the second one is the backward compatibility. Now it's time to talk about the anonymous method. Let's do that. Okay, now it's time to talk about the anonymous method. Suppose you have situation that you want to create a method and you will use this method only once. And you want to pass the behavior of this method to your delegate. For this reason, I have created an action because it's the return type is void. And here I passed the print hello to this delegate. But I told you I want to use this method anymore. For this reason, for situation like this that you want to just use a method only one time and you want to pass the method behavior into the delegate in every place that you need, you have to use anonymous method. But what's the syntax of anonymous method? Okay, and what's the advantage and disadvantage? Okay, here I come here. For creating an anonymous method, you have to write a special keyword is delegate. Okay, and now you have to open and close a parenthesis, and the next part is the body of your anonymous method. For example, for this item, I don't want to use this method. I come here and just do this like this. And if I type action and run the anonymous method and the delegate, you will see that in the output it say, hey, hello, hello, anonymous method. Okay, anonymous method. But what happens if I have a parameter? Okay, no problem. Here you can pass your item. For example, x int y. Now you can use all of your parameter in your item. For example, I come here and say x and y is something like this. Y. Now you are using a delegate. Okay, and for this reason, you have to come here and pass two items. For example, 20 and for example 24. And here you have to say, because you have the action I told you, you have to pass the item. For example, I say it and it. Okay, now the error have been gone. Okay, now if I run the program, say hello anonymous method 20 and y is 24. And for the situation that you have a return type, you would see something like this. For example, return x plus y. What? Why I got a red underline error? Okay, because in here I have a return type, so I cannot use action. I have to use what? Don't forget func. And here, what's the another method, another problem that I have gotten here is say, hey, because I have passing two parameters, I told you for func, the last item show you the output, but the last item is it. But here I have two items. For this is then I have to pass another item as int. Now it's okay. If I pass something like this, we can say int result, and here if you, for example, you want to just type it, you will see 44 in the output. Okay, but what's the advantage of anonymous method? The advantage is here, we are reducing the code size, okay, and it's so useful for delegate event and sometimes callback, but sometimes it has some annoying item. For example, the disadvantage of delegate is they are still using for example, they are still using anonymous space, a lot of space to use just create a very basic delegate. And the second part is we can solve this problem with the Lambda expression, and we can do this 3 or 4 line of code with just one line of code with the Lambda expression. In the next part, we are talking about the Lambda expression. Let's do that. Now it's time to talk about the Lambda expression. Is the Lambda expression is another name for delegate? Many developers think so, but it's completely wrong. The Lambda expression simply is a shorter syntax for creating method. Okay, for suppose here I have created an anonymous method and passed the return type to this func delegate. But if I want to manage this line of code with the Lambda expression, I can do something like this. Just one line of code. Here I have created a Lambda expression and passed the return type to this delegate. Okay, but here there's a one important question. How does the C# know what's the type of X here? How does the C# know that? That's the answer is the delegate. The Lambda expression itself is not stored in anywhere. Okay, but it always should be converted into one of these: delegate, action, func, predicate, and expression 3. For example, if I come here and uncomment this line of code, why? here I got a red underline error because here the C# cannot understand what's the type of X here. Okay, for this reason I got an error. But if I convert that to a delegate, for example, here I want to say, hey, did you see what happened here? The lambda expression converted to a one of these. Here converted to the Func. And that's the reason I'm saying the lambda is not and delegate. The lambda is a way to create an anonymous method in a shorter way. Okay, here I have created a lambda expression and passed to this Func. But I told you if I change it to the var, I will get a red underline error because the C# cannot understand what type of X I'm using here. Okay, now what's the syntax of the lambda expression? We have, for example, different ways. One of them is something like this. I can use in this way. Another type is, for example, when we have only one parameter, like here. Okay, in situation like this, you have just say, hey, I have an input parameter X, and here is the body of your lambda expression. If you have, for example, in situation that you have more than one parameter, you can do something like this. If I come here and say, hey, I have another one. In situation like this, if you type something like this, you will get a red underline. You have to put all of your parameter in open and close parenthesis, and after that, let me change it to a square 3. Now you can have, for example, X multiplied by y. That's another syntax of lambda expression. But what happens if I have more than one line of code in my lambda expression body? In situation like this, you have to open all of your code into a open and close curly braces, something like this. For example, I have, and now you have to use the return keyboard. But when you have only one line of code, it's not necessary to use the return keyboard. But when you have, for example, more than one line of code, you have to put all of your code into a open and close curly braces. But why the LINQ and, for example, the lambda expression after the LINQ was introduced become so popular? That's the answer. For example, I come here, and here I have a LINQ item. This is the word. For example, here I want to pass an anonymous method. For example, say delegate, I have one input parameter and I want to return an int. Okay, but here I can manage that only in here. Did you see? That's a lambda expression. If you come here and did you see here in the where condition, I can pass a lambda expression. You can use lambda expression with LINQ, and that's one of the reasons that the lambda expression became more popular. Because, in my opinion, LINQ without the lambda is nothing. Because you have to you have to create a lot of line of code to just create one line of code with the that is equal to the lambda expression. That's the reason. Okay. In the next video, we are gonna to talk about the LINQ. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel. Goodbye.